This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. So we all know Republicans are bereft of integrity. They are liars, they are grifters, they are charlatans, and if they're not that, I'm specifically talking about people in leadership here, not the rank and file Republicans, because they don't have the grift ability. But people are obsequious to Donald Trump. They'll do what he says. They will bow down for any scintilla of adjacency. I'm not even sure if that's a word, but being adjacent to, having the characteristic of being adjacent to power. I mean, it is not funny. I shouldn't laugh, but it's such a debasing character, self-assassination of one's character that it is a little funny. And Ronna Romney McDaniel's, there's maybe no better or apt example of this. Someone who changed her name to please Donald Trump. She dropped the Romney, Mitt Romney's niece. She dropped the Romney from her name because Donald Trump doesn't like the Romneys, certainly doesn't like Mitt. She helped Donald Trump try to steal the election in 2020. She was part and parcel to it. In fact, I was going to start with this clip from Meet the Press this weekend, but let's start here. She's being paid $300,000 a year to just be a contributor as someone they go to for information, as though she's going to give them accurate information, as though she's a reliable source for truth. NBC, what are you doing? So I'm going to play a clip here from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection, where she was a witness, where she testified under oath to her involvement with John Eastman, Donald Trump's lawyer, also tried to overturn the election, and Donald Trump himself in the plan to try to overturn the election. Watch this.
Ronna McDaniel, chair of the Republican National Committee, testified before this committee that President Trump and his attorney, Dr. John Eastman, called her and asked her to arrange for the fake electors to meet and rehearse the process of casting their fake votes.
When I received the call, again, I don't remember the exact date. It was from the White House switchboard, and it was President Trump who had contacted me.
And did President Trump have anyone else on the line with him?
He introduced me to a gentleman named John Eastman. So I vaguely remember him mentioning that he was a professor, and then essentially he turned the call over to Mr. Eastman, who then proceeded to talk about the importance of the RNC helping the campaign gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the result of any of the states.
These fake electors were ultimately part of the president's plan to replace genuine Biden electors with Trump electors on January 6th. As part of this plan, the false electoral slates were sent to the National Archives and to the Capitol. The fake electors plan was also tied to another plan, the coercive pressure campaign to make Vice President Mike Pence reject or refuse to count certain Biden electoral votes so that President Donald Trump would, quote, win re-election instead.
That's not all. I was going to play another clip here, but I'll just read from the screenshot here. That she, when they say RNC here, this is not just the RNC. She's the chairperson of the RNC. It's her. Help Trump campaign assemble fake electors in Michigan, her home state. Hosted Trump campaign news conference alleging widespread election fraud. Called the election rigged repeatedly, multiple times. Leveled accusations against election workers and election officials in Michigan that were patently false lies. All in an attempt to end democracy in America. And look, I get pushback for saying, well, what do you mean end democracy? If you reinsert Donald Trump, a man who lost the election, to be president again, you reinsert him in that office extra constitutionally, extra democratically, anti-democratically, you've ended democracy. And she was part and parcel to this. She was a bad actor in this conspiracy. And now NBC News sees fit to hire her to the tune of almost $500,000 a year to go to her for information. I got two clips I'm going to play. One is from the interview with Kristen Welker, who isn't a gem, doesn't do a good job, just the way it is. And then the other is from her predecessor, Chuck Todd, who finally somehow located a spine on the set to come and stand against this decision to hire Ronna Romney McDaniel. Not a decade too soon that you come around, Chuck. First, Kristen Welker talking to Ronna Romney McDaniel about this.
All right, well, let's talk about the election now. Donald Trump says one of his first acts, if he is reelected to a second term, would be, quote, to free those charged and convicted of crimes related to January 6th. Do you support that?
I want to be very clear. The violence that happened on January 6th is unacceptable. It doesn't represent our country. It certainly does not represent my party. We should not be attacking the Capitol. We should not be having violence. I said it that day. I put a statement out that day that this is not acceptable. If you attacked our Capitol and you've been convicted, then that should stay.
So then, but to the question though, do you disagree with Trump saying he's going to free those who've been charged?
I do not think people who committed violent acts on January 6th should be freed.
So you disagree with that? He's been saying that for months. Ronna, why not speak out earlier? Why just speak out about that now?
When you're the RNC chair, you kind of take one for the whole team, right? Now I get to be a little bit more myself, right? This is what I believe. I don't think violence should be in our political discourse, Republican or Democrat. And I disagree with that. I agree with him on a whole host of other things. Let's close the border. Let's make sure we have good incomes for people. Let's make sure we do a lot of great things. But on that point, I don't think we should be freeing people who violently attacked Capitol Hill police officers and attack the Capitol.
Ronna, that is such a fundamental point. People would argue such a fundamental point to our democracy. You say you still support him. I assume you're still going to vote for him based on that.
She wants good incomes for people. What a bold stance. Listen, this tells you everything you need to know about where the Republican Party is in 2024, that this is a bold stance to come across and say, I don't believe there should be violence in our politics. And I said it on that day. I made a statement on that day. You know who else made a statement on that day? Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, you got to go home. And then in the days that followed, came out with far stronger language that he was opposed to giving, but someone wrote it for him, so he read it, about it being unacceptable and that they would face the mighty weight of the Justice Department in prosecutions for their crimes. And then what has happened since? We'll remember forever that this is the Republican strategy going forward. This is what it is. It's out of one side of their mouth, they say, oh, it's terrible. Violence is terrible. And then out of the other, they incite violence. And she was thick as thieves, still is, with Donald Trump. Now, she's been ousted for the Nepo baby, the Nepo daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. But this is who she is. And NBC sees fit to hire her, the liar, the anti-democracy ghoul, Ronna Romney McDaniel. Which brings me to Chuck Todd's contribution to this conversation. Now, I agree with the things he's saying. It's just rich coming out of the mouth of Chuck Todd, who for years was the host of this very program, and didn't conduct himself, didn't comport himself as the strong journalist that he should have, as the person who will hold power to account. But here he is, now not host, playing a role as, I guess, the devil's advocate here for the company. And this is what he had to say.
Welcome back. The panel is here. Chuck Todd, NBC News chief political analyst, Kimberly Atkins-Storrs, senior opinion writer for the Boston Globe, and Stephen Hayes, CEO and editor of The Dispatch. Chuck, let's dive right in. What were your takeaways?
Look, let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself, or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here? I will say this. I think your interview did a good job of exposing, I think, many of the contradictions. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. So it is, that's where you begin here. And so when NBC made the decision to give her NBC News' credibility, you got to ask yourself, what does she bring NBC News? And when we make deals like this, and I've been at this company a long time, you're doing it for access to audience. Sometimes it's access to an individual, and we can have a journalistic ethics debate about that. And I'm willing to have that debate. And if you told me we were hiring her as a technical advisor to the Republican convention, I think that would be certainly defensible. If you told me we're talking to her, but let's see how she does in some interviews and maybe vet her with actual journalists inside the network, see if it's a two-way, what she can bring the network. So I do think, unfortunately, this interview is always going to be looked through the prism of who is she speaking for, right? I think you did everything you could do. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this interview, and then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program, but I am glad you did the best that you could, and that's why the three of us are on here to try to bolster that editorial independence.
Well, I appreciate that. Go ahead, Kimberly.
This is why independent, beating the drum about what the differences between what I do and many people on this platform do versus what the media does, what the mainstream corporate media does. It's a stark contrast. It's a vast difference. There are oceans of difference between those two models of holding power to account. She's in a powerful position. She gaslights them. She acts like they are the devil. She demonizes them. And then when it's time to cash them checks, she's right there. Oh, no, I was speaking on behalf of the Republican National Committee. That's what I was doing, Kristen Welker, colleague. The stakes are too high. This isn't a policy debate about taxation or entitlement programs or defense spending. This is the literal continuation of this country and our republic. This is an existential threat to our nation that is just being handled like normal politics as usual. And it's not. And it is mainstream media that is doing the disservice to you, disrespecting you, your intelligence, by having her as a paid contributor. $300,000 is a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a good salary. And this isn't going to be her full-time job. This is just one piece of her income that's going to be paid by NBC. She's certainly going to be doing other things and making money elsewhere. So good job, NBC. Fantastic. I'm glad you're a partner in preserving democracy for the rest of us. That's great. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail, 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me, as always, daily@dollemore.com. If you want to take part in supporting and producing this program, helping reach the masses, or however large the mass of individuals that I reach is, you can click the join button below this video on YouTube, become a channel member for $2 a month. You can go over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. Follow me on social media. That's free, and a terrible, terrible time. If you're on social media, please get off social media. I'm at Dollemore everywhere, and I'd love to see you there. If you're going to stick around, I would appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine and take care of one another.